Good afternoon and welcome to the last of 3 global webcasts with MIT President Rafael Reif. I'm Judy Cole, the Alumni Association's EVP and CEO, and I will serve as moderator. And I want to thank the hundreds of alumni who have participated in these conversations and thank you for tuning in today. As you can see, Tim the Beaver has decided to join us as well. In this final webcast, we will be discussing MIT's role in the world. Of course, the Institute is inherently global. More than 3,000 international students are enrolled in MIT degree programs, and MIT hosts more than 2,000 scholars from 90 countries who teach and conduct research. Some 15% of alumni live in 163 countries. MIT has embarked on major educational collaborations in Singapore, Russia, and Abu Dhabi. The MISTI program sends more than 700 students to work in programs in 17 countries each year, and many research areas such as climate change must be addressed globally. Before we turn to President Reif, I want to remind you that you can do more than just listen to this conversation. To ask a question, click on the email address at the bottom of the screen. Type in your question and send it to us. We will not be able to cover every question over the next half hour, but we will answer as many as possible. To begin, President Reif, could you share your thoughts on how MIT can strengthen its global impact?
Thank you, Judy, and welcome, Tim, for joining us. Our global impact, how to strengthen it. I think maybe we should start assessing or thinking why is that MIT engages globally or internationally. And as you mentioned, Judy, you mentioned what we're doing in Singapore and Abu Dhabi and in Russia and MISTI and so forth. We also have so many programs like that, JPAL and D-Lab. And I think probably the only one that is really, really global is edX and MITx. All the other ones are more international. We work this nation with another nation, or MIT with Singapore and so forth. Why we do these programs is basically for 2 fundamental reasons. One is to expose our students to a global environment, a global culture, to understand that things are done differently in other places and what and how. So it's to educate our students into a global marketplace of ideas and to understand the world in which they are joining when they graduate from MIT. So the educational purpose is an important one. The second one is the research activity. We want to work, as we have discussed, I think, in another webcast, on the most challenging problems of the day. And most of those challenging problems are really global. So we need to interact with people from other countries and other cultures to understand how to address these problems the best possible way. So that's the context within which we operate and engage internationally. Now, how to strengthen it? You mentioned MISTI and 17 countries. I would estimate that we are probably engaging in, I haven't counted them, but it's probably 30 to 40 nations in the world in which we have some engagements of one sort or the other. How to engage more globally, or how to strengthen that? If by strengthening we think in terms of engagements, then we have 195 nations in the world, so we have a long way to go. So I don't think that is the approach. I think the approach is to engage in areas in which we think our students can benefit from and MIT can benefit from the point of view of research. Now, having said that, as I half-jokingly a moment ago said, MIT and edX are really global. We have right now learners from every single nation in the world. So that is a huge global impact of one program we have and we started. So we can start with that and see what's in the minds of our alumni.
Excellent. Thank you, President Reif. Many alumni have sent questions to us in advance, and more will be coming in, so let's get started. The first question from Anjali in Boston is one that I know many alumni ask often. Will MIT ever consider opening up a satellite site in a different country? What would be the benefits and challenges of doing this?
For the time being, and I think for all the MIT's history, we haven't done that. MIT is only one, and it's here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's very difficult or probably impossible to replicate MIT Cambridge and have an MIT in another location. So we have not endorsed that model. We prefer the model of building capacity in other nations by helping them, by working with them, so that we can build a peer institution that we can collaborate with. So we believe in building capacity, and the world needs a lot of capacity to educate. Building capacity in different nations, but building it for the nationals of that particular nation. So it's their institution, it's not us. It's not an MIT a satellite elsewhere. So it's just a model, it's a way of thinking. The benefits of that is that we have an institution that is being run with the culture of the place, but using the MIT DNA, which is what we try to do in the places we're engaging. That's an important benefit. If we were to create a site elsewhere ourselves that we own, then if things don't work well or the situation changes, it's very difficult for us to pull out. So we actually prefer to engage with others, to help them, to work with them, but not to have our MIT site elsewhere. It's just to help them create their own university with an MIT point of view. That's what we favor today.
So another question, Elizabeth in Atlanta asks, what is your assessment of MIT's global engagement today, and what are some of the criteria for making decisions about the future projects? Where are we going next, maybe?
Yes. Well, as I said, there are lots of countries we haven't been yet. So Elizabeth, so I think the assessment is one of success. If we measure the activity, we measure the kind of research projects, we measure how MIT has been strengthened by these interactions, MIT has been strengthened. From that point of view, has been a successful enterprise. What's the criteria for making decisions? I think the most important one is faculty interest. I mean, I can go to another country or another institution and we can strike a deal and we can agree the way Judy and I are talking and let's say, let's work on this. And I come home and I tell the faculty, hey, I have a chance to work on this. If they don't want to do it, it doesn't go anywhere, no matter what I say. So I think the most important criteria is faculty interest. And by and large, faculty interests are driven by the quality of the project or program or the research challenge, because they are looking at big important things they can contribute to and what they see as benefit to MIT and MIT students. If a particular program that I may offer to them does not benefit our students, it does not provide opportunities for world-changing, world-impacting research, faculty would not want to do it. We are in quite a few places, and I think we are in conversations to being even in additional places, but I would say we're beginning to reach capacity in how much 1,000 faculty can do. So we are exploring other opportunities. If they work out fine, we'll do them, but I don't think we'll do many more beyond what we're doing today.
Yeah, there are some capacity limitations.
On ourselves, right?
Yeah. Aaron in Cambridge asks, how can we leverage MIT's international student body and increase the number of students who have an authentic overseas experience while at MIT? How can we cultivate dialogue among these students and between them and those who have not yet had such experiences?
Very, very good question, Aaron. So I think perhaps the best program we have to offer, as you mentioned, an authentic overseas experience is the MISTI program, where we have students doing internships abroad, typically in the summer. That is a very successful program. As Judy said, I think we have like 700 students going last summer, overseas. And you're asking how can we increase that? The reason we don't have more is not because of lack of interest, it's just lack of resources. The demand to participate is huge. And it's one of my priorities for the next campaign that we're planning is just to provide more funds. Not only to increase the number of countries, but to increase the number of internships, because we are, MIT is paying for those, and that costs us money. So I don't think we have a problem creating interest. It's huge, it's there. We just have to provide the funds for that. Now, in addition to MISTI, all the other programs we mentioned, those we're doing in Singapore and Russia and so forth, those we're doing in other countries with JPAL, all those offer additional opportunities for students. So we don't have an issue there. There is significant demand. We just have to provide with the funding and opportunities for students to go abroad and have that authentic experience you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So here we have a question from a native Venezuelan.
Is it in Spanish?
Luis in Seattle. If it is, we're in trouble because no hablo español. So forgive me. As we move towards a more connected, information-centered society, we run the risk of leaving behind the needs of the poor to pursue more profitable technologies. What is the role for academia in encouraging focus on improving access to water, curbing crime, and related areas?
Well, I'm glad, Luis, that you asked that question. I'm just disappointed you didn't ask it in Spanish, but that's okay. We are not leaving behind the needs of the poor, quite the contrary. Just think for a moment the kinds of things we are doing. Look for a moment about edX. edX is to basically democratize instruction globally. And yes, indeed, a learner has to have access to the web and has to have some semblance of a computer, but that is really reaching massive numbers of people. But in addition to that, and I think, I don't know whether you were here when you checked, I think the webcast that we did, the last one, I think is on the website, you can access it. But one of our top priorities for the next coming years is going to be exactly what you said, water and food, to assess exactly the point you mentioned. You addressed curbing crime. Crime has a lot to do with poverty and inequality. And we have JPAL, the Jamil Poverty Action Lab, is actually studying that. So D-Lab is a tremendous a project that involves our students trying to help people in developing countries how to manage themselves and how to create what they need themselves, the tools they need. So no, we are not leaving behind the needs of the poor. We're very much involved in those activities. And by and large, a large fraction of our faculty want to do exactly those kinds of projects. So all I'm trying to do is just providing them the resources to do exactly what they want to do, which is the point you made.
So our next question is from Robert in San Francisco. MIT has involvements in countries around the world such as Russia, Singapore, and Abu Dhabi. Does the Institute have a strategic plan to coordinate these ventures?
Well, indeed. So we have a strategic plan to identify, first of all, where to go. And it's very important that, as I said earlier, that faculty have an interest to engage. It's important that we see the other side committing long-term to this interaction. It's important that we see benefit to our students. I mentioned that very quickly. And that identifies which countries we can engage. In some countries that we want to engage, we have not engaged because we haven't encountered a meeting of the minds in which we find the right projects that would benefit MIT. So we have had many more conversations with entities and nations than those we are engaging because things have not worked out perfectly for the benefit of MIT. In terms of coordinating them, indeed, we have a vice president at MIT that reports directly to my office that is dealing with these international programs. His name is Claude Canizares. He used to be, until recently, the VP for research in general, and now he has the portfolio of international engagements.
Zhen Wei in Guangzhou, China, has posed the question, MIT's influence in China is not proportional to the reputation it enjoys in the country. Will there be more initiatives for China, and how can alumni in China help out?
That's a very good question. China is a very important country in the world, no question about it. It's becoming more important every day. And we have quite a few engagements in China, but perhaps not as many as I would like us to have. So we are constantly looking at opportunities, and we are in conversations to do something in China, in the Shanghai area, in the Guangdong area, in Shenzhen, across from Hong Kong. We have been in conversations. If we are not doing more activities right now, it's because, again, the conversations have to be such that end up with something that is mutually beneficial for MIT and for our potential partners in China. So the interest is there. We just haven't found the right kind of activity that we can do together for mutual benefit. How can alumni help out? Well, I think perhaps the most important help we can get is if there are some ideas that anybody thinks, or some, since you are there on the ground, opportunities that you see that you would suggest for us to engage. I would love to know about them. I have visited, I think I went to China less than a year ago. I'm planning to go to China again for a few days in a month or so. So we are engaging, we're talking to each other. We have some visiting faculty at MIT that are visiting institutions in China and also exploring opportunities. So it's a very important nation in the world. It's a very important nation to us. We just have to find the right project for us to engage jointly.
The theme I hear emerging from your answers seems to be it always comes back to the faculty and the students, and it's got to be win-win for everybody.
Those are two very important points.
Danby in Lisboa, Portugal asks, how can alums who have moved abroad contribute to the global initiatives of MIT? Sort of picking up on Zhenwei's question.
Well, I think excellent question. We are engaged in binational activities in quite a few nations. In fact, Danby, we have a program in Portugal as well. And I think, how can you get engaged? Just find out more about the program on our website. If there are areas that you want to engage, just let us know. Let us know those who are running those programs. Then all the names are on the website, or just contact me directly. I think we would love to have our alumni engage in countries in which we are doing something with the local talent to engage and help us. That would be terrific. Beyond that, I'm looking for opportunities in how to increase the impact of MITx globally. I'm speaking with quite a few individuals and quite a few institutions to try to create opportunities for us to perhaps translate some of the material in the local language so that the reach can be even larger, and how to exchange opportunities with other universities in local places for us to work with them on how we use the edX and the MITx the way we're using it on the MIT campus to tell others how we're using it, so perhaps they may want to use it in their local campuses as well. So I'm looking for those kinds of opportunities and in places in which we're not engaging directly as we are in places like Portugal.
So George in San Francisco asks an interesting question. Viewing MIT's international cooperations, what have been the main drawbacks and or problems so far, and what has been learned?
Excellent question. And we have learned quite a bit, and there are some drawbacks. I think that in some of these programs, particularly those that deal with capacity building, those that deal with research alone, this is not an issue as much, but in capacity building, in which we're also dealing, educating and working with educators in those other countries, that pretty much requires that our faculty spend some time there. And that is great for the faculty, it's great for the interaction, it's great for us to learn with our students who are there in those countries, to learn from the culture of the country and to learn how to do things more globally. But it leaves a vacuum here at home. So that has been a drawback. And has not been significant, but enough to notice and enough to figure out how we handle that in future programs or how we modify existing programs. Another drawback, another stuff we have learned is that we think in terms of what we can do for ideas for our students and research, and we think in terms of what our faculty can do. What we haven't given too much thought until we realize that has been a problem is the load we just impose on our administrative staff. So each time we add these activities, we add to the same people we have here a much more complex set of interactions. And we have not thought, and quite frankly, I blame myself for this, how to offer, how to create more positions, how to increase our admin staff to help support those significant engagements. So the major drawbacks are these two. Faculty load, when they leave here, the rest of the faculty who stay here get an extra load. It's very small, but enough to notice so that we cannot just keep increasing without addressing that. And the admin load, the administrative load, has been much heavier than I imagined, and that requires addressing. But besides, those are the major 2 points, and at least we recognize them, and we are trying to modify and address them for the benefit of MIT.
Ignacio in Watertown asks, how can small countries like the ones in Central America and the Caribbean strengthen their relationship with the Institute? Does it always have to be the big boys or, the big countries?
Yes, well, that's a good point. I think again with most of the countries in the world, I think the way that I think we can start engaging is how to use the educational opportunity we have with edX and MITx. I think that's the low-hanging fruit. We could do a lot of good if we can just take, like in America, we call Central America, and translate what we have in Spanish and so forth. So I think there is lots of good that we can explore there. Beyond that, if the interest is to have binational kind of interactions, MIT and a country in Central America, it's extremely important that we find faculty champions that want to do that have some synergy with the needs of that particular country or a group of faculty, and that will get it triggered. Absent that, I think the low-hanging fruit is really going on the educational domain with edX and MITx.
Well, here's an interesting one just in from Mark in Fargo, North Dakota. Many would characterize MIT as a rigorous, technologically engaged institution that promotes excellence in teaching and education. Yet MIT advances are culturally bound, i.e. the arts, the humanities, religion, philosophy. How does the faculty see its expanding global initiatives as engaging the local and particular sides of historical life around the world in a positive way?
How does the faculty see expanding as engaging the local? That is probably one of the most exciting aspects of it, because when we think in terms of learning how to use the technology innovations you see at MIT or the scientific innovations, we try to think in terms of how can we use them to help, how can we use them to do something positive in the world. And yes, students in the US at MIT, they understand the cultural environment in which they operate, they work and they study, and they understand how can they translate what the innovations in our labs into how it can be used in our local society. But it's tough to do that for another society, another country, unless we understand the culture, the arts of that society. My hope, my belief, actually more than hope, is that by having students from MIT interacting with those students from other countries, by working there, by spending summers there, by having research projects with them, they learn enough of the arts and culture of those other countries to actually have a much broader scope of applications for the innovations that are produced here in our laboratories.
D-Lab comes to mind. When
D-Lab
you
is a
talk
great
about
example
that.
of
yeah,
that.
I remember some of the innovations that I've seen students display when they come back that are just amazing, like
Absolutely.
a bicycle-driven corn husker or something.
Right.
Anne in Wisconsin asks, how could MIT's recent research on manufacturing help strengthen America's competitiveness and help the global economy?
Well, that's another excellent question. I think a great deal of the manufacturing that the whole global economy has benefited today deals with what I would call, or some economists would call, a low-wage or low-cost manufacturing. And when you talk to those who are in that kind of business enterprise, they would tell you that we are beginning to see, we are at the beginning of the end of the low-wage manufacturing economy. So that means that we're going to have to move up all manufacturers, whether they're in the US or in other developing countries or in Asia, they're going to have to move up the productivity curve. So research in manufacturing that we do at MIT, or research that has applications in manufacturing, like robotics, for instance, would not just help America's competitiveness as all of us move up into the productivity chain, productivity curve, but it will also help the global economy as they have to figure out how to move out from the low-wage manufacturing approach.
Here's another one just in from Urshad in Lexington, Mass. How did the recent economic downturn impact MIT, if it did, in terms of global competitiveness?
Well, we were very fortunate. It did impact MIT. And I suppose that, Isha, you're asking about the 2008, 2009 financial issue we all faced. We did have to cut, if you might remember, $120 million out of our operating budget because those are the revenues we lost with our endowment decline and so forth. It was done quite carefully. It was done in a couple of years. I had an institute-wide task force looking and providing advice. So we did what we had to do, but we did it in such a way that I don't think it impacted us negatively in terms of our competitive position. In fact, by every single metrics you can look in terms of where MIT is today and where MIT was 10 years ago, we are in a much stronger position today. So we have not been affected, but we have been very fortunate. I don't want to predict what will happen if we have another crisis like that. I hope we won't. That was very painful. But no, we have not been seriously affected by that at all.
I think in many ways it made us stronger, actually. It brought us together as a community.
That is very true.
Hiroshi in Menlo Park, California asks, how can MIT alums contribute to building ties between MIT and a foreign country's government? I am an advisor to Osaka, Japan on innovation and economic development, and am working to connect them to Silicon Valley.
Well, that's an excellent question, Hiroshi. I would love to, I just mentioned in answer to other questions that we are heavily involved in quite a few countries, but there are many more in which we are not that heavily involved. And in some of those nations, I am looking for opportunities because that's important for to strengthen MIT. There are many, some of these communications, some of this connection between MIT and other leaders in terms of universities or government leaders are actually facilitated by alumni in those countries. So if any alumni of MIT, Hiroshi could be such one, but many others that are listening to me or watching us right now, if they see opportunities, if they see interest in their home countries to move towards a knowledge-based economy, if they see interest towards in those countries to move into an innovation economy, and they want to figure out how MIT could work with them to learn from them and to teach them about how to move towards an innovation-based economy, I would be happy to have that conversation. And the MIT alumni who could facilitate that conversation between somebody at MIT like myself and somebody on the other side, I would mostly welcome that.
I think we have time for one last question, and it seems fitting that it should be about our most global program, edX. Ephraim in Owings Mills, Maryland asks, can edX be leveraged to find the world's most talented people and bring them to MIT?
That's a terrific idea. I could give you 10 minutes of answers on just that question, Ephraim. I think you could imagine sometime in the future, and I don't know when in the future, in which perhaps in order to apply to MIT, you have to probably take some freshman courses and do well on them and demonstrate you can handle the MIT quality material. So I think this is a very attractive opportunity. The technology is not there yet, but I can see how for things like that, in order to be much more precise, when we admit students, right now admitting students at MIT is almost, I wouldn't say it's a lottery, but it's not that different from a lottery. We do the very best job we can, but when you have more than 18,000 students applying for an undergraduate to be at MIT as undergrad, and we can only admit like 1,500 of those, which is like an 8% admission rate. That's very hard because I can assure you that out of those 18,000 applicants, at least 9,000 could do very well at MIT. So this can provide us another tool for us to assess how to really choose the right 1,500. But again, this is a little early. This is part of the idea bank we have of things we could do with edX and MITx. But ideas like that are going to be implemented not immediately, but in some future.
I can remember when we had a conversation on that very idea over a year ago.
That's right.
I think it's time to wrap up. So remember, this webcast marks the last of 3 conversations with President Reif. You can view all 3 webcasts online at the URL on your screen. President Reif, on behalf of the MIT Alumni Association, thank you so much for sharing your time and your insights today and over all 3 of these conversations. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. We encourage you to continue this conversation on the Slice of MIT blog at the URL that is on your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.